Hi, I'm Lori.
And I'm Kevin, and this is No Longer Ashamed.
We are survivors of childhood sexual abuse.
And we're here to share with you that if you're a survivor, you don't have to be alone.
Our logo is a salamander, and the reason is a fire salamander can survive a fire, and you have survived a fire.
We want to help you with your journey to healing and hope.
We are all survivors together, and we walk this journey together, and you are not alone.
By telling our stories, we are hoping that you will have the courage to share your stories as well and find your voice.
Because stories are so important, and for so long I know that I wouldn't tell my story, but when I finally shared my story, that's when I got my freedom.
And this is our journey and your journey to healing and hope. So come with us.
We are so excited to have a special guest with us, and it is Charnell Bulger. She is Kevin's wife, my dear friend, and I am so excited. Doesn't seem like the right word, but I'm glad for our topic because this has been a really big deal, and I know that you've been following things going on locally, and we're going to be talking about coaches. So welcome, Charnell.
Well, thank you. I feel like that I'm just with my two best friends, so that's fun.
Besties.
Yeah. It is been a real passion of mine to the offense I find in athletic coaches and trainers and team doctors taking advantage of sports kids especially at the young youth level. And there's so much that is involved in all of that. And then we have seen it so much at the college level. Also in the last 10 years, I was going over an article from the Dordulian Law Group in LA, and it's amazing. I'll give you more about that later. But just if you remember, there's just been so many out there college coaches and doctors, and not just the girls gymnastics, but there's then the Michigan, then there's just down the line, boom, 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 Penn State, and all these, and they list them. And it took a lot of guts for especially those college athletes to come forward, but it takes so much also all the way along the line for the high school boys to come out is hugely a big deal. And we don't even really understand the support we need to give those kids when they do come out, admit that they've been molested or abused or put in some kind of sexual trauma from a coach. So that has been a huge passion of mine because I coached for years and have always been involved with athletics. And my father was a coach and my sisters were coaches. My brother was a coach. He was at a high level. And so we all, are really part of the coaching thing, and to see somebody abuse that, especially for their own titillation, is just irritates me beyond belief. And I just want to go a little boondock saints on them, is what I always say. I have that just especially recently with this situation here in the Northwest with basketball players. Yeah, so that kind of got me going, and I get all revved up about it, as you know, Lori, and Kevin knows as well. So yeah, so I have some ideas and some thoughts and some ways that people can be aware, especially if they have kids starting out or if they recognize it at one level, and coaches, what you can do to make sure you stay up above the level, and also recognize if you've got coaches in your crew, how to spot people coming in and wanting to help out that should not be there. So, all those thoughts racing around.
Yeah. And this is so good because I feel like sometimes this is something people don't want to talk about. And so there's a few aspects I want to cover. First of all, any abuse is horrendous. But when you think of coach abuse, you think of what the coach represents. So as a coach, talk to us about what a coach is. Like, kids are taught to respect, to trust, talk about what a coach is and then why it is so egregious when a coach takes advantage.
Well, I think when you take on the role of coaching, especially in a head coach position, I was always wanted to be and always took the position of the JV head coach for girls basketball a lot of times. And I like that because you can have more of an impact with the the different girls. You have the little freshmen that are starting out and they're going so hard. And then you have the malcontent juniors who still are on the JV team, haven't made varsity. And you have the opportunity to really impact lives. As you know, my father was a well-respected coach and loved deeply. And, he was very respectful of that position. And especially as a believer in Jesus and a reputation that he just held a really high integrity. And that comes through because you do have these kids trusting you and looking up to you and trusting that what you tell them is going to happen and they believe it. And then as they execute and they start to see success in their play, in their talent and all that, then they start to trust you even more. And then, then they will do so much for you. Oh, and their parents now are like, oh, yay, look at that. You're doing so well. Oh, coach, blah, blah, has just put you on a pedestal. And the grooming down in the younger, these little, the little league, I want to say, but like little dribblers or the little everything where they start out at soccer in kindergarten but then when they get into that elementary school, kind of that 3rd to 5th grade level, that's where you got to really start to pay attention. And I know that for a lot, just because this is a concern of mine deeply, and I've done a lot of reading and research and stuff, just appalling the stats on it.
So for a coach, your role is to guide and build trust with these kids. I mean, it's very similar to teachers, but you're teaching them how to play a team sport. You're teaching them how to be a competitor with a team. And there's all these aspects that the kids are relying on you to teach them, so that you're basically a trusted mentor. And at the same time, you have to discipline them and so forth. If they do mess up, if they do break the rules, you have to have guidelines and so forth. You have to have rules. But on top of that, there is a reward system with coaching.
Exactly,
if you do well, you're going to get rewarded. Well, and that can be where it can be taken advantage of, is when you have a reward system and you have like favorites or the so-called teacher's pets, that you reward certain players more than others. And then there's grooming that can happen with that.
Yeah, I really think that that's an important thing. And one of the aspects of the coaching part that comes in, Lori, is that performance piece. That we have that in the classroom as well. But when you're performing physically, athletically, and it's such a part of our society today, then, they see, oh, maybe someday I can be a pro baseball player, and if I do this right, or maybe a basketball, I can, all these things that they have. Little kids have dreams that they're going to one day hit a home run in the World Series. It's just that thing. And then they get that in their head. And when they start to say, oh, I'm doing, and the coach, and then all of a sudden the predator coach plays in on that and starts to see, and then private lessons. And then there you go. All of a sudden, right, you're in a pickle, or you're in a bad situation, and it's trauma. And trauma can start just with that instant of attention and awkward, and then not knowing, and oh, what's this? And then, oh, but it's okay. It's my coach, and I trust them, and they think I'm really good. So they're going to make me a better player so I can get that scholarship, so I can, pay my way to college, and mom and dad are so happy with the way I'm playing now. And so do you see what I mean? It just really is a power, what a pull for people who can navigate that as a coach, especially at a higher level. Like maybe they were a college player and they're a perpetrator, and because maybe their coach or somewhere along the line, they became a victim. And so there's that whole thing where they have minimized that, oh, the play is okay, play around, it's all right. And then, so I didn't want to make that sound like the coach predator, and then the coach becomes predator, because we've had that big conversation lately. But there has been, and that was the one with the coach. I can just say the name because it was in the paper, the Sumner coach out here. He was a high level player in college in a D1 school. So that was a big deal. And they even said, use the term, they were so excited to get him because it was a feather in their cap as a high school to have him come in and play. Well, turns out that he had been on the ropes before in a school, and there had been reason to raise an eyebrow, let's say. But of course, which is another thing, getting a little ahead of myself, but then how the districts a lot of times, or the colleges, especially in the college, they turn a blind eye or they try and cover up and they panic, and be sure your sins will find you out. And I want to support so much athletes because of all the, what do I want to say? Like, I want to say the virilism and masculinity and that athleticism part for females as well. And all that, all that is so important. And then that sexual part, especially for boys, that shame. And I've known pretty sure kids where I grew up that were, maybe it wasn't a coach, but maybe it was a hairdresser or it was some barber they had. And all of a sudden, before you know it, kids in about a 10-year period of time, many suicides, many boys committed suicide. And, so there's just those, that's maybe something we'll cut out. But at the same time, you have to look at these things, right? I mean, we have to say, what is this? I'm uncomfortable with this. What does Julie say? If you're uncomfortable, the gal who had been trafficked in her book, if you're uncomfortable, then I call it the Holy Spirit in my life. That maybe for you, that's something told me that this isn't right. Mm-hmm. So you know what? Like they say on Watch, better to err on the side of wrong than that you made a call and it was wrong than for not making a call and all of a sudden a kid is in a compromised position.
Exactly. And I think what makes it so awful is you have a kid who has, like you use such good language, a dream, and now they know something's wrong, but if they tell, they're going to lose their dream. Like the child mind can't really process. And I think that, as we on this podcast are mostly talking to adults who could be parents who have a dream for their child, what would you say to parents? Because it would be really hard. I mean, I hope a parent would believe a child, but if a child came home and said, he's always slapping me on the butt and it makes me uncomfortable. And the parent might be like, well, that's basketball. Like talk to us about what parents can be looking for, and parents will live vicariously through their kids. And so then they might actually pressure their kid to put up with it.
So true, Lori, especially in athletics where boys are playing and their dads are playing. Maybe they played varsity, high school, football, basketball, lacrosse, whatever it is. And sometimes it's a really masculine sport, but you know what? It doesn't matter for those perpetrators. And the parents hold a huge responsibility, and slapping somebody on the ass when you're coming into a huddle situation, which I might take this parenthesis to talk about that for a second. That's not okay. And you know what I like about this day and age? We are made to be aware of that kind of stuff. The Me Too movement. How many times did I have my ass slapped when I worked in the restaurant industry back in the 70s and 80s, 90s? No, but we just did it. It was just part of the thing, right, Laura? And that's just football. That's just basketball. That's just whatever. No. Now it's not okay. So let's not do it. And we need to teach, sorry, but we're not doing that anymore as a team. Sorry, but it's just like using language that we shouldn't, and racism language and things like that. We should not be doing that kind of thing because, we don't know who we're triggering either. And I really think that and I'm going to talk here about this, which is leading this, is a little ahead of the game, but being in a huddle or being in a proximity. And in athletics, many times, like in wrestling sports or in football or in where you're really tight, close in, and you're in a huddle. And that's a perfect time for an assistant coach to be a foderizer, to be rubbing his junk on somebody's hairy leg next to him. I don't mean, we should probably put an E on this. And that happens. That's what this is about. This is about them. Oh, yay, time out. And this is a coach thinking that, I'm going to lean in here. Ready, 1, 2, 3, go. Let's go. And what you're doing is you've created a situation. We just have to get away from that, because I maybe sound weird here, but it's just a good, safe thing to do. We've had lots of this here. And it happens a lot. The statistics are crazy. So it's not just here in the Northwest, but we've had lots of coaches with girls basketball that are male coaches and stuff like that. But you've got it all across the board in all kinds of different situations. And a lot of times when you're talking to people and about their first experience with trauma or an inappropriate touch or something like that, it has come from an athletic situation.
So for the parents, what can they be looking out for? What is it that they can be aware of? Is it just that keeping tabs with your kids and making sure they're comfortable, that they're happy?
Well, I think that's a really good question to ask, Kevin, because it's more than that. Number one, you need, especially when they're young, I would say, sometimes when they're really young, the fathers are being the coaches. And so maybe you can do a little more due diligence in that regard for who is that kid's father, make sure. Well, when they get up a little older, they start being coached by the program of the school or the district or whatever's little league teams and stuff like that. This huge gargantuan group of sports, and they all have different teams, and then they all play each other.
And they're supposed to be background checked. But
yes,
as we know, often school districts will turn their head because it's not proven or whatever. So.
Right. Or they're saying, or they just, and especially when they move it down from the district into the club, then they say, well, so the district's like, we're not involved, which is true. But what you are still needing to do as a parent, it's your responsibility to go and to do your, again, due diligence on that coach. Who is that coach? Who is he? Where has he coached before? Do you know him? Jane, do you know him? Have you had anybody know him? Did your sister have this kid play for? I thought that kind of stuff, like find out, question. If you care, question. Because you should be questioning who is coaching your kid, especially if they're going to be in a locker room or traveling. Get this. 89% of the kids who are abused violently and sexually, especially in Europe, 89% are international travelers. They travel. So almost all the travelers that go on these big trips in some way, whether it's coach, whether it's teammates, whether it's something they're fooling around or whatever, it happens.
So when they're traveling internationally, there's 89%.
89%. That is the actual stat in the material, and we can make that material available.
Like you said, you're in closer proximity. And if you travel, you're going to be in hotels, you're going to be in situations. I think one thing that could help is if there is always another coach or another parent, or there's always present, because, we have a lot of crossover. And, we also don't want a coach that's a good coach to be falsely accused and there's no representation.
Exactly.
Because that does happen. I think that's way more rare than the actual coaches that do these kind of things. But that also, we look at Sandusky, that was horrendous. People spoke out. They took it to the school board. They took it up high, and everybody just ignored. And he's such a nice guy. And the thing is they look like a nice guy. They act like a nice guy, and people don't want to believe they're bad. They would rather demonize the child or the person coming forward than admit that this coach is flawed.
And also, sporting is so performance oriented. If you have a team that's successful, if you have a team that's doing well, you don't want to question how they do it. And especially a lot of the parents won't even if their kids aren't comfortable, if their kids' teams are successful, the parents aren't going to come forward. They're going to be all about the success, especially, if they think their kid's got a chance to make it to, a scholarship to college and maybe even beyond. They're not going to risk that.
Yeah.
Because of the performance is all that matters. If their team's winning, then they don't care how they get there. They don't care,
It's sad.
And that's, I think, how a lot of coaches get away with it. And look at the whole U.S. gymnasts for so many years.
Right in front of the parents.
Right in front of the parents.
Because he made up that lie about the uterine floor, a pelvic floor, and right in front of the parents.
But
so they
all were successful, and they were, going to the Olympics. So that's all that mattered.
Yeah. I mean, it's unbelievable. And then there are parents who are trying to do their best and do their due diligence, but the perpetrator is very sneaky and also very don't tell kind of, I'm going to kill your whatever.
The grooming.
I don't know that they say that necessarily, but you know what? I'm not going to start you tonight.
Exactly.
Or I'm going to tell coach blah, blah to not start you tonight. And that I really feel, and because this assistant coach has been playing in D1 basketball in some big university somewhere, and maybe even played in the tournament and the Sweet 16, the 8, the whole thing. Well, then they just don't want to mess with that, because they're all of a sudden now I'm on the starting 5 and I'm actually scoring how many points a game, but he's going to bench me if I don't do the big duty, perform for him. Mm-hmm. And sometimes with this one that happened out here, he would get them together. So they were together and minimize the fact, everybody does this. It's just part of the, and porn is used, of course, in that situation. And then it turned out the parents were just totally horrified, and which happens a lot. To some parents, they're like, and they had been, but if you look back, this had been going on a little bit down in the little leagues with the guy. But then too, the community and the district after the accusation, did not, and the parents let it happen, didn't pull the guy out of the community. And so every time these boys went to school who had ratted them out, he was there, and he would be there. Or if they were at some baseball game, professional baseball game or hockey game or whatever, and he would show up with the booster clubs, and he would be there, and here are these kids who had been molested by him or abused by him or violated in some way. That's not appropriate. And I love the way the Europeans call it violence. They don't call it trauma. They call it violence. And that's what it is, because you're ruining a kid's whole life and their whole mentality and their whole dream because you want to have some orgasm. Well, I'm sorry. You can cut that out if you want to, but it just irritates me for 2 seconds to repeat it and repeat it and repeat it, because you're just, I don't know. It just goes beyond these kids who work so hard. I have seen kids work their tails off to the nth degree to get better and to be better. And then to have somebody mess with their playing time because they won't do the performing on their body.
And they feel so alone. There's no one to talk to.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden, they find out, he's doing it with him too. Oh, he's the point guard and he's doing it with him. Well, oh my gosh. I just want to say, parents need to trust their gut as well. They need to trust. And if they care, trust your gut and pay attention and chaperone everything you can. Be at every practice. Ask the coach, question. Ask them constantly. If they can't answer you stuff that you want an answer for, there might be something there. And if it's okay, if it's nothing, well, so what? What if you've just made a little bit of a, she's a stupid woman out of yourself or something, but who cares? You were standing up for your kid. Would you want your kid to come back in 26 years and say, you know what? I was molested by that coach and I told you about it and you did nothing, or I couldn't hardly tell you, but I tried and you didn't listen.
Right.
You don't want that.
And so along with that, Charnell, think about this. 26 years is how long we know it takes. So that coach, if they don't retire, has 26 years longer to abuse children because they make them believe it's the only one. And where Kevin says, where is the outrage, is the statute of limitations is 7 years. So nobody can do a thing about it.
Exactly. And it's horrible. And even recently, we've talked about on a previous episode about going to the legislature to try and change that. And then the people going against it go, we just can't. It's too much money. And, meanwhile, these perpetrators get to stand there and shoot baskets with the kid. But again, don't do it alone. Always have a coach there. Always have more than one. And that's one thing I wanted to address too, just moving on a little bit from parents, is we have a responsibility to make sure that the kids need to always have somebody with them, especially in the young grades. But you know what? What does it hurt to say, why don't you guys both go out and go see the trainer and be together out there? Because trainers have an open field to having their hands all over. There's a woman in Southern California who's molested just got busted for molesting many boys in her training office and has had, and all kinds of, it's just disgusting. And so she had that ability. But, there are ways you can see my dad did it. We know as teachers as well, Sunday school teachers in the school, we're taught this is what you do. Keep yourself safe from accusation. And you have to do that. You cannot not do that.
How do you do that?
Well, you have to be able to either, leave a door open or just say, time out, you guys shoot baskets for a second and go with them to it might screw up practice time, but you know what? You cannot afford.
So what you're saying is never be one-on-one alone.
Never alone.
With a child.
Yeah.
In situations where you're isolated from the rest of the people, you need to have someone else there with you. If you're a coach and if you're a player, you should feel like you need to have that safety of having someone there as well. Even when it's just the trainer, there should be someone. You shouldn't be in a one-on-one and isolated.
Right. It's the first thing we learn with swimming, which is one of the first sports kids do, is the buddy system. And I think that would be brilliant to always be implemented for a kid being sent over to the trainer, even to the doctor. It's like, let's always have two, because the perpetrator is less likely.
Yes. Exactly.
To attempt it if there's
there's witnesses.
Or if there's somebody.
Someone.
But the other thing is too, on this, it gets inconvenient. Oh my gosh. Well, now I have to go. I mean, okay, let's just leave the door open and da-da-da-da-da. Well, I get that, but it's inconvenient. But you know what? You have to pay attention to that. And never, if you see a coach calling your kid and wanting your kid to come in and work privately with them on some type of aspect of their game, no, don't do it. Don't let it. Just say, why aren't they doing this to everyone? Well, he sees a special technique in me and I have the time. No, you have to be aware of those situations. Everybody sells it. Oh, you're getting, private time with this coach, or he's setting me up with a private coach over here, or this private trainer over here who's really good at whatever it is, shooting or hitting or pitching or all the stuff that involves in sports. Well, who knows what's going on there? I just really feel like it's really important. If you're going to send your kid to a private lesson, and that's important, then you go with them. It's not to say, oh, you can't go to a private and have a good private lesson. Well, don't leave the room. Don't leave the field. And if they want to go to the bathroom and, I'll take them to no, you stay with them all the time, because you have to be hypervigilant.
Exactly. And a big red flag is like, people will be like, they were so nice. They always wanted to babysit them and give them rides and take them on weekends. Like, that is a really big red flag.
When they go out of their way to give them special attention, I think that's how they can groom.
Yep.
And so for a parent or for someone who is in a coaching situation, it's important to make sure that there is accountability.
Yeah, that's the bottom line.
If that child is going to be given special treatment, then they can't, you have to make sure that there's someone else around, not just the coach or the trainer, but someone else there. And even if they're going to see the doctor, as we know, the doctors also take advantage and have gotten away with it because they're able to be alone with a minor, but you need to make sure that there is someone else there, that there is accountability. That's what we learn. I mean, that's, fundamental is just accountability.
I would just not let my kids go to the bathroom during practice or the trainer. No, I'm just.
It's
but usually,
ethical
to our practice, you take care of business before you go. And I'm kind of, I like to have a lot of fun, but I like to work hard when it comes to sports. But one of the things I found worked well for me, and I feel is a good tool to use, especially when it comes to texting and communication. You never privately text when there's some communication to get out. As a coach, you do not privately text. Do not privately text. Do not Snapchat stuff. And this guy was busted because, partly because a lot of his pictures were Snapchatted of the privates. So what I would do is I would have my captains, I would meet with my captains in person and say, okay, this is what I want. And I would, say, hey, I need to talk to you. Can we talk right now? And they'd be on lunch. And so, or something. And I was usually around because I was an interpreter for the deaf and hard of hearing. I was active in all the kind of different school projects. Well, I would just get a hold of my captains in person and say, can you text the girls and tell them we're moving practice from 5 to 7 to 7 to 9 instead because we can't get the gym, blah, blah, blah. So just it's easy to do that. And if you've got a coach that's doing that and your kid's playing for that, that's smart. That you pay attention to that. That's those kind of things that says that's the right thing to do. Don't privately text. No privates. No.
And also when we think of predators, they go after kids who don't have accountability. So if you're a parent or another coach and you see something inappropriate because this parent can never give rides or whatever, so, their parent's not available, I'm going to give them rides, say something.
Right.
Absolutely. It's like those are the kids that need the protection even more because their parents are whatever. Maybe they're addicts or maybe they're just busy. They're a single parent. It's like the predator is going to prey on a child who doesn't have that supervision. And so it is the responsibility in a community of the other parents to be paying attention.
Absolutely, Lori. I can't stress that enough what you said, because we need to be aware. And as parents sitting in the stands, when I sit with my sister and her boys are playing baseball and stuff like that, they're a community. And you know what? If something's not right, they'll find a way to let you know. And I think that is something that needs to be encouraged, especially when you have these kids that their parents are working late or their parents aren't around or their parents, like you said, are just in a really bad situation. And so they're by themselves. And those are the kids who get preyed on a lot of times. Oh, he's giving me a ride.
Right.
Or we don't have to walk,
We see it with like youth pastors too, where when an adult shows interest in a child that's really inappropriate and nobody says anything like, oh, the youth pastor, well, I'm just going to come over to your house and, oh, your parents aren't home, I'm just going to come hang with. I don't care if that youth pastor maybe is just a kid at heart, then somebody needs to mentor him and teach him that's not appropriate. And I think that's what happens is there's not the accountability over the top. And so they could end up being young and stupid and get in situations. That's why I love it that you said it's so inconvenient. But you know what? It's inconvenient for kids to swim alone. Do we ever let them? No, that is a non-negotiable.
Right.
It's always the buddy system. And I feel like that's the way it should be with sports, whatever.
Exactly. And it's just so frustrating because with sexual abuse, they're going to drown later. They might not drown that day with the buddy system, but they'll drown later or in like emotional baggage or whatever. And I want to hop on this for a second because I remember I was coaching and my team wasn't playing at the time. And so, but I was sitting in the stands getting ready for the next game or whatever. And the kids were probably 4th grade or whatever. And I'm watching one of the coaches and they're introducing the team to each other in the middle of the court. They're 4th or 3rd or 4th graders or 5th graders. And he was a father and he was a good man. He was not a perpetrator, but as they're reaching for, he's introducing, he'd put his hands on the shoulder of the little girls and say, hey, this is who you're guarding today. Cause they all guarded one-on-one. And so he grabs this girl and he shows her the girl in front of him and said, this is who you're guarding. And the little girl is going like this.
So brushing his hands off of her.
Brushing his hands off and going like this. And then later we found out, Lori, didn't we, that family had adopted a bunch of kids from all over the world. And the father, after years, we found out had molested almost all the kids, all the girls for sure. And they don't really know about the boys.
Yeah, everybody was like, oh, what a wonderful family. They've adopted all these kids. And then the side of the house that he put to bed at night was the side that
was. And I'll never forget that. And I knew right then, I thought, that's wrong. Something's weird there. But then I thought, well, I passed it off. That was.
And your gut reaction is to think that it was the coach that caused that reaction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in this instant, it wasn't the coach because you knew that the coach was.
Right.
I really believe.
Right.
Yeah. I really believe that God or the something gives you a warning system all the time. And we might blow it off. We might blow through it. It might be just that fast, or it might be thinking about it for a while. But how many times have we had that feeling that, oh, that's not, that's weird, or something like that, and we're given that. Mm-hmm. We're given that. And we just need to practice acting on that more.
Because we are responsible as the adults in a community, in a church, in a team, whatever. We are responsible. Children don't know how to defend themselves. They don't know how to process it. And so if we are not paying attention and we're going, believe me, I was a single mom. It can be really inconvenient. But if it's like, oh, well, they want to give my kid a ride, it might be easier, but is it better? Mm-hmm. And when you think about Dream, when you said that, I just thought it's like the actresses that acquiesced because they had this dream, and it's like, that is horrendous.
Yeah.
Well, and especially it's the kids that need the mentoring the most. The kids that need good guidance the most are often the ones that are getting preyed on, because they are the ones that don't have the guidance, the mentoring, the good family situation. Mm-hmm. And
it comes down to power.
It does come down to power. So for adults, what we can do, it all comes down to accountability. We have to be sure that those coaches, and how do you do it with your kids? I guess you can basically check in with them a lot. Make sure that they are comfortable with the coaching. Make sure they feel like the coaches are honorable to all the kids. Maybe ask them, do you feel like they treat certain kids differently than others?
Favorites.
Do they have favorites do they do special things for other kids? Ask them about the accountability. When the coaches do have trainers and so forth, how is that run? How is that comfortable? Is that safe? Do you feel like it's safe for you? There's basically, we are relying on these people to take care of our kids in a setting that is very physical. And often in high school and college years, they're exposed to a lot of stuff. They're in a locker room with these kids and so forth. So there's a high amount of honor that we bestow on these coaches. And do they live up to it? And the only way to figure that out is to ask the students themselves. Is this, are you comfortable with this? Is this right? Are they handling it well?
One of the things that's really important when you start reading the stories of the collegiate athletes and stuff like that go on, the only reason that basically it seems to me as I read the article, so this is my opinion, that all of a sudden one guy will come forward, or he'll start to ask a friend, man, that guy creeps me out. And then all of a sudden the other one was like, he creeps me out too. And then all of a sudden the conversation begins. We need to tell our kids always, like we say in all the episode stuff with children and whatnot, that, this is my no touch zone. If anybody touches you, and it's always safe to come home and tell your guardian or your person, or if they're not comfortable with their parents or guardian, to tell somebody, Aunt Lori or Uncle Kevin, whatever, tell that person. Well, tell somebody that you feel comfortable with. This guy makes me really uncomfortable. And to let them know in the beginning, when they start playing, it's just part of their mentality. If this happens, because it's even happening more. And maybe that's because there are more kids sports than there used to be. And, as we were talking about this, I'm driving home today from doing some errands, and here's these little signs on the thing. Get in, it's fall, it's football, it's getting into basketball, it's going to be girls soccer and soccer boys and blah, 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 get in, and the I-9 or whatever. And fortunately, this group it's called SafeSport, and they're working on initiatives to put into place that are going to be law. And I want to dig more into that and be able to maybe in a few months come back out and give some more report on that. But, I see that and I think, how many kids this year? And I just want to go out to every little field and go,
I'm watching you.
Yeah.
What are these initiatives for?
They're for making sure that the kids are safe. So there's safeguards that are put into place that are law, like the background checks again, but more stringent. These are the guidelines you go by. And if this doesn't, happen, I'll have to find a little more out about those, because I just found SafeSport, and I want to really get involved with them.
There was a group that was forming, and it was around recovery, and they had some kids, and they said, oh, we're just going to let the kids babysit the kids. And I'm like, no.
Yeah, no.
And so I think these initiatives are good because they make parents open their eyes, because a lot of times parents are like, oh, they're cool, they're good. But, that's when the danger happens. But I would say also as a parent, don't be the hothead. If the kid comes to you, don't react. Listen.
Yeah.
And I like what Kevin said, ask questions. How does that make you feel? When I was a single parent, I had no control when my kids were not with me. So when they would come back after, for instance, their dad let them watch movies, I would never let them watch, R-rated, scary, not like porn, but like violence, and
scary stuff.
They just thought, it's a boys' initiative, and they would be having nightmares. And I couldn't call that parent and say, you can't do this, it's never going to happen. Well, how did that make you feel? You have choices. If you don't want to see that movie, you can go to another one. Like empowering the child, because if you just get hot-headed, then they're not going to tell you, and you're going to miss those clues. So be a good listener and empower them as you go, so that they will say, hey, I'm uncomfortable with that. Because if we get all freaking out, maybe we get triggered because something happened to us, then we make it about us. And now we've overridden that child's opportunity to be safe, to learn, and to be able to tell. Because, we want them to tell, but they're not going to. If we're going to freak out, they're going to be, they said, your parent will freak out. And now I'm going to get pulled out of the sport. And that's not what I wanted,
Or, and like you said, if they're doing something on away games and it gets minimized, and, if you say anything, or like you are ashamed, you don't want to be a part of it, but there's that, you feel like you have to be a part of it. I got involved. I didn't want to, but all of a sudden this started happening. And then I was in the middle, and if I said anything, they would make fun of me and bully me into watching, or bullying me into participating. That happens.
Oh, yeah.
That happens. Just recently, we had a girl tell her story to us, and I'm like, holy cow.
Yeah.
And it was brutal. I mean, I don't get shocked very often. And she was really honest and very young. And to think about that. And that's the hard thing, to be able to empower the kid enough to just say, go to the bathroom or whatever and text me. It's snowing at grandma's house and your grandma lives in Phoenix or something. Or, some code that they have that they can go, I got to take a pee. And so they leave the room and they like panic text you, and you have something like that they can know, that they can stand on this. I really feel like you got to dig for ways to make your kids safe. And you know what? This day and age, with all that's going on and all the weirdness out there, we can say uncomfortable is uncomfortable. Me Too movement, excuse me. You have the right to say this. So let's do it. And one of the things I want to say, the stat with SafeSport is SafeSport indicates that they received more than 7,000 abuse reports from survivors from 2017, and this was published in 2020, and it's just from kids that have been in youth sports, whether it was at that time or later, that about the sex abuse. And that there's probably 3 times or 4 times that many. And these people found SafeSport and they reported to SafeSport. So, and no one knows about SafeSport. But look, 7,000 since 2017. It's just, the stats are incredible. When you think about it's almost, we need to watch every team our kids are on. We need to be together as parents and as guardians and as people who care, as part of the village, as part of the tribe, and watch out for our kids. We really do. And there's ways we can do it. And I really am passionate about making sure that coaches who are in question don't ever get a chance to coach any kids anymore, ever.
Just last year, there was a teacher, I don't know if it was a coach or teacher at Lake Stevens, that got fired, and come to find out they had worked at a different school district. Same thing had happened, but they never reported. They just fired them all the time. And so, I think as parents, if we see that, I feel like maybe we grew up in a generation where it's like, just roll your eyes, put up with it, deal with it, but we don't have to anymore. And our kids don't have to. And again, I'd rather have a kid be uncomfortable and wrong, and we can flush it out, than not say anything and be right.
Exactly. And like you said, these schools and the colleges and the athletic associations, whether it be the Olympics or whatever, there's a cover up. I mean, look at the Olympic stuff. There's a cover up. Michigan, Penn State, all these like giant issues. There's a cover up. Well, instead of, how great would it be if they said, this bastard, and you're fired, and go, and you lose your, retirement, and you should go to prison, and we'll stand by our attorneys. Well, everybody would be going, yay. But no, what do? They cover it up, and then it's a giant, enormous mess. And you know what? Just be honest. Get that person out of there.
Yeah.
And because many times they leave them in that position to, while they're making the decision, hello.
Yeah. Right.
More kids, are being affected. Kevin used to help me coaching, and he was always so respectful. And the girls were just like, oh, we'll go with Kevin. I was like, no, we'll all go together, because, he was like their uncle or dad or somebody,
right.
Coaches, and he always helped them and stuff. But you know what? It's just a policy. You just have to say
policy.
Yeah, that's where we can start, is with policies as well. I mean, to make it so that the coaching staff are always accountable. And, it of course starts with background checks, but it also starts with how they run their program and whether or not they are accountable at all times with the kids. So many times it seems that the coaches that have the favorites, that have the ones that they treat differently than everyone else, that often that's where it starts. That's where the grooming begins. And so how do we make a policy around that? That's not really something you can do, but you can make policy about how, like Charnell was saying, no text, personal texting, instant messaging, all of that stuff. That's just not there. There's like group texting that would be acceptable. So you have to look at all the policy, and now with all the different means of communicating, with texting, messaging, et cetera, you have to police it a lot more carefully, because it's so easy for them to get around certain, they can find other ways around the different policies if they're trying to work the system. So it starts with policy and it starts with accountability, but I think a lot of it has to fall on, and unfortunately for those parents that aren't capable of being like, you know how it was as a single mom. You're so busy. You're just looking for some way to get the kids active and busy to give you a break. And so you kind of count on those coaches to take care of your kids for you at that time.
Yeah, but how about the church gives rides to the kids needing rides home from school, and it's like, two moms take, whoever. One thing I wanted to say that I have down here in my notes that is really important, because I have nephews, and I grew up with the dad coach, and he put a stop to it all the time, but especially in boys. They mess around with each other and joke sexually and, make horny comments or whatever. Girls aren't really, they might talk about the guys all the time and blah, blah, blah. But the boys get really graphic and really naughty and really, to that erotic side. And if they're joking around a lot about all that kind of stuff, and you see it, like this one swim coach that I knew, she would be standing, she coached varsity swim at a triple or 4A high school here. She's a friend of mine. And she said the guys used to walk up to her. She'd be coaching, and she'd have some guy walk up to her and say, hey, coach. And she'd turn, and they're in their Speedo, and what is right there. Okay. Well, it was a joke. It was funny. And she'd just go, she did a great job of putting it off. But what I'm saying is that kind of stuff, you have to kind of nip it in the bud. If they want to do that somewhere else, what are you going to do? But in my gym, in my stuff, and in my locker room, during my 2 hours, I have you're going to know it's dirty. You're going to know you need to clean it up. You're going to know it's wrong and it's offensive. And so if someone does that to you, oh, coach, back in the day, coach said, maybe you'll think about that before you do something that's almost like a hazing or something like that. And that happens a lot. The guys, they do all kinds of stories I've heard, and you got to nip that stuff as a coach in the bud, that inappropriate behavior.
Well,
Right.
and hazing still does happen. It's still frequent in a lot of, especially college level programs. And that's another part where it starts with the policy. If they let them get away with hazing, then there's going to be a lot of things that are just not dealt with, that they just kind of let slide. So,
well, I think it's all been under the guise of becoming a man or rite of passage. And so we've overlooked it for that. But there's other ways to become a man. There's other ways. And, you know, what you said, Charnell, along with boys being nasty is, you know, saying, hey, I'm not going to allow this. But also what boys will do is they will say, oh, well, my woman, or they'll talk bad about women.
Right.
And the whole Me Too. We have to stop that right there. We're not going to talk about women and girls and moms that way. A coach has a really big responsibility where they can, I think about your dad's funeral and all those men that stood up because your dad had such an impact on their life. You know, your dad chose to be a mentor. He chose to be a coach. He chose to speak the truth. And those boys' lives were changed. And many of them had single moms. And a coach can do that and stand up and give them something to bounce up against, or they can be selfish and go the other direction and ruin lives. Like that's why this is such an important position. A coach is a big deal and they have a lot of power. And if they use it in a way, they could make leaders, they could make presidents. And I think that's what it's really important to think about. You have this amazing position. And if you don't toe the line,
right,
it's like you're saying, okay.
Yeah, you're allowing. And so for as a parent, I guess you want to look at the coaches that your kids are going to. And I would view them from the point of, if I was that kid, would I be gaining from being coached by? What would I be gaining? Right. Is he or she an honorable person? Is he or she care more about the individuals, more about them than winning? Or just winning games or whatever? Do they actually care about the growth of the players?
Right.
Well,
and I think too, you know, that when you say that, it's like we've seen and heard a lot of terrible coaches who yell at kids in a way that's inappropriate.
And the rowing parents, coach who abused verbally and sexually just recently out here at Connery, you know, that's horrible. He's in big trouble.
And again, it was all performance based because he had rowed, I think it was Olympics and or.
Well, it was a high level. And also his teams performed at a high level, but there was numerous accounts of abuse that were just basically ignored because they wanted to win. Yeah. And the kids get really groomed into that. And this is another thing, Lori, just kind of wrapping that up with the thing. If you're a mom and you're questioning and you're, even though, this is a good coach, you know, I appreciate them. His wife's with him here at practice and their kids and whatever. And everything falls in line. But there's a little kid whose mom has to work and, you know, is struggling for that. You know, we need to be those people who pick up the slack because it's not, this kid can't help it. And that's not a bad coach. That's a good coach. He's doing the best thing he can. He could be like my dad kind of coach. But we need to pick up the slack to carry that kid to the next level because his mom is doing everything she can to pay that stinking $400, $500, $600. It's ridiculous how much they have to pay and they sacrifice, and they're single moms or they're families who just don't have a lot of money. So they're working. So we need to be able to recognize that. You know, Lori, it's just that thing you taught me in your classes. It's like, pay attention. Pay attention. That's what we need to do. It's like, what are we doing? And you got your phone in your hand and it's like, oh, wait, what's he doing? It's like, no, he's been doing that the whole game. But anyway, I'm serious.
Pay attention.
We are not paying attention. So you know what? It's your fault. So you need, your kid was molested when he was 5 years old. Do you want this story or 6 or 7 or 8 or 12 or 16? And you had your head somewhere else. And you are expecting that now your kid is on the rocks, completely off the charts, an addict, going through miserable stuff, possibly even end up incarcerated, because we know that sometimes this happens with people who have gone through sexual abuse. It just sometimes spins. It's just one of those things. You got to be careful.
Right. And I noticed as a mom who had been abused, I was hypervigilant.
Yeah.
And I know that drove people crazy because they're like, they're fine. But then I would see other parents who had a wonderful, lovely childhood. The thought never occurred to them that something could happen to their kid. So I think I love what you say is pay attention. It's like, and I do see this like at bus stops when I'm driving, parents that are on their phone, the kids are running around the bus stop. It's like, can't we just pay attention? Mm-hmm. Can't we just put that phone down? And I know for some parents, they need that. They just need a little bit of checkout. But I like what you said about if you're in a church or you're in a group, let's help those parents that are stressed out. Let's step up and be helpful, but also pay attention. And, I think it's wonderful people that come from homes that were never abused and that they don't even have that inclination. But we all need to know this is happening, and it may not have happened to us, but we want to pay attention so that it doesn't happen. We don't want it to just skip every other generation. It's like, oh, I'm not going to pay attention because I didn't never have anything happen. So everybody's good. We love everybody,
Yeah. And kids can perform and feel good about everything and perform to their highest level.
And feel safe.
Yeah. And be safe.
Yeah.
And I think that's another good point is we put a lot on coaches, but how can we help, especially if we're not in a position of like some of the single moms, some of the people that are working multiple jobs just so they can support their kids and get them to sports. If we have the opportunity to help those coaches, maybe, volunteer to give rides or what we can do to take some of the load off of them and also, make it so they're not being put in position that might compromise them. Mm-hmm. There's opportunity for us to help them out. We shouldn't put all the burden on the coaches. And, I think some parents can be more present and more
or grandparents. Maybe you're retired and you live in a community that they have Little League down the road. What if you just become part of that and you become the grandparent that's always got your eye? I'm a big person about what's next. What are you going to do? And if you feel called to something, but you're older and you think, oh, it's too late. It's like, no, it's never too late to show up, to be present, to be available. What is that call on your life? And it might seem ridiculous or silly. I love what you said, Charnell, about what if a bunch of people in the church are like, me and, my husband and we're just going to go to the school, and people in our church, we're going to give them rides back home after sports. Like, where's the gap? And let's fill it. Like, What are the gaps and how can we fill it if we got spare time?
Yeah.
Well, and the thing is, do your due diligence, make an observation as a parent and do whatever. And, I think this is good. I really appreciate you guys giving me the time and all that. And I think this law group in LA has done, he was the lawyer who was a sex crimes investigator for years, and they specialize in helping and representing abuse cases and sex violence and trauma. And so we'll put that on. I gave them a phone call and so asked if that would be okay. And they're going to call me back. But you know what? We put it up there for you because whatever information you can get is good. Make yourself aware. Now that you know, you're responsible.
Remember G.I. Joe? And knowing is half the battle.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this has been good. And I would like to visit again because there's so many things I still want to say. Number one, you're listening and you go, I was abused, but I thought I was the only one. It's not too late to tell. If you can't do that, get a counselor, share your story. It's like the most important thing is that we heal ourselves, because if we heal ourselves, then we can heal our community. And it's like just what we're doing here is making people aware, share it, tell it, and let's make this a safer world for our kids.
Absolutely.
So that's it for today.
We are going to have a prayer time if you want to stick with us. If not, we believe in you.
We want to hear from you. We want to hear your stories.
If you like this podcast, please rate and review, because that's how other people can find us. And we really want to spread this message.
Well, this is when we usually wrap up and pray. So we're going to ask Charnell to start.
Lord, thank you so much for this opportunity. I just pray in the name of Jesus that you would protect the kids that are starting off and stepping off into their first year of athletics, or their second or third, or maybe they're stepping into varsity. And there's been all kinds of different situations here, Lord. I just pray a hedge of protection and the covering of your love and care over all of the children who are stepping on a field or a game or a floor today and in the future, that you would put a sense of your Holy Spirit on them and convict the coaches who are in it, or the people who are involved, whether it's a trainer, whether it's an assistant, whether it's a doctor, whether it's a volunteer, Lord, that you would convict them. And I just pray, Lord, that you would your will be done, your kingdom come. And that would mean just not having this kind of issue to have to deal with. Lord, we thank you so much for this podcast, and we just ask that you would grow it and bless it in the name of Jesus.
Father, I just thank you for all your blessings. And I thank you for the awareness that we've been having in the last few years of how people are shedding light on these dangers, these issues. And Lord, I just pray that you would bring light to these, and that we would become more cognizant and more trusting of our gut feeling and being careful. And Lord, I just pray that you would help guide the parents and the children to be safe and to know when things are not right and act on it. And Lord, I just pray for all the coaches that are doing the right thing. Lord, I just pray that you would bless them and support them and help to encourage them. And Lord, I just pray for more coaches to do the right thing, to be honorable. And I just pray that we would find ways of making them more accountable, making the system more accountable, Lord. I just, those children are so vulnerable, and we trust the coaching and the team so much, but we need to protect those children. I just pray for more accountability on that in your name.
Lord, I thank you that we can pay attention, and thank you for the awareness. Lord, we live in a day and age where this has been undercover for many years, and we don't have to let this happen. We can pay attention. Mm-hmm. We can speak up. We can trust our instinct, and we can tell our story if we have a story, and maybe even to see, is that coach still coaching? It's that we have a responsibility. If we see something, we say something. If we know something, that our first responsibility is the safety of others, and especially of children. And I thank you so much for the work you're doing through SafeSport, through lawyers that are stepping up. And I just pray that with this podcast, we can continue to raise awareness and help people, A, tell their story, and B, help people be more aware and pay attention. In your son's holy name, amen.
Amen.